The wind swept through the dusty street of Copper Creek as the sun bled gold across the western sky. Evening light painted the wooden saloon fronts in amber, and the old church bell chimed its slow, solemn song. A wagon creaked to a stop before the sheriff's office, its wheels stirring a small storm of dust. From within, a woman stepped down, small, modest, her dress plain and travel-worn. Her hands clutched a simple suitcase that looked older than she did. Her name was Clara Whitfield, though no one here knew her. She was a mail-order bride, but not the one anyone expected. She'd spent the last of her savings to get here, clutching a letter she'd answered out of desperation. "A kind, God-fearing woman to share my home on the range," the ad had said. Clara was neither proud nor desperate enough to beg, but life had been unkind. The war had taken her brother, and sickness had taken her mother. When the orphan shelter in Denver could no longer afford to keep her, she made a choice, a long shot at a life where someone might finally want her. When she stepped onto the dusty ground of Copper Creek, her heart trembled between fear and hope. Men stared, some with curiosity, some with pity. Her boots sank slightly into the dirt. Across the street, leaning against a hitching post, stood Elias Carter, the cowboy who'd placed the ad. Broad-shouldered, steady-eyed, with a look that spoke of long days under the sun and longer nights alone. His hat-shaded eyes the color of the desert sky after a storm. But the look he gave her wasn't what she expected. It wasn't warmth, it was confusion. A kind of hesitation that froze her breath in her chest. "You're Clara Whitfield?" he asked, his voice low, cautious. "Yes," she said softly, holding out the worn letter. "From the Denver shelter. I answered your advertisement." He glanced at the letter, then back at her face. "I was told the agency would send, well..." He paused, searching for words polite enough to hide the truth. The photo he'd been sent had shown a woman with golden hair and bright green eyes, a photograph that had probably been taken 10 years ago or never hers at all. Clara's hair was dark, pinned hastily, her face touched by fatigue, her dress faded from years of use. Clara forced a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I know," she said quietly. "I'm not the pretty one you ordered." For a long second, silence stretched between them. The town seemed to hold its breath, the only sound the wind whispering through, the saloon sign chains. But then Elias took a slow step closer, his boots crunching softly in the dirt. His hand rose, hesitant at first, then sure as he tilted her chin up gently. "No," he said, his voice deep and steady. "You're all I needed." Her eyes flickered up in surprise, shimmering with tears she tried hard to hide. He smiled, not the kind that came from politeness or pity, but the kind born of a man who'd spent too long searching for something he didn't have words for. The few men watching from the saloon porch exchanged glances, muttered something about the Carter fella finally getting hitched, and turned back to their whiskey. But Elias didn't hear them. His world had narrowed to the woman standing before him, the one who had come all this way for a chance at belonging. He lifted her suitcase easily. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you settled." The ride to the Carter ranch took them past fields touched by dusk, the sky a wash of crimson and gold. The land stretched wide and wild, dotted with scrub and sagebrush, the mountains watching like silent sentinels. Neither of them spoke for a while. The rhythm of the horse hooves filled the air, steady and soothing. Clara kept her gaze down, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She could feel his eyes on her now and then, curious, not judging. Finally, he broke the silence. "You from Denver all your life?" "Not really," she said. "Just ended up there. I grew up near St. Louis. My father was a blacksmith. He died when I was 16. He nodded slowly. "You've seen hard times?" "Most folks have," she said with a faint smile. "I just learned to keep walking." He glanced at her, thoughtful. "That's a good way to live out here. The land don't forgive quitting." When they reached the ranch, the sky had dimmed to lavender. The small wooden house stood firm against the open plains, its porch light flickering warm against the wind. Inside, it smelled of cedar, coffee, and the faint tang of saddle leather. Simple but clean. Elias set her bag down near the hearth. "Ain't much," he said. "But it's home." Clara's eyes traced the walls, the hand-carved table, the single rocking chair, the old Bible on the shelf. Everything looked worn but cared for, like the man himself. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He looked at her then, really looked, and something in his chest shifted. She wasn't what he'd imagined when he wrote that letter. She wasn't the bright, smiling woman from the photograph. But her eyes held something deeper, quiet strength, the kind that didn't need to be announced. "Clara," he said softly, "you don't owe me anything. If you came here thinking this was your only way, you don't have to stay." She turned to him, her voice trembling just slightly. "I came here because I wanted a life that meant something. I may not be the woman you expected, Mr. Carter, but I can work hard. I can learn, and I don't scare easy. If you'll have me, I'd like to stay." He smiled then, a slow, honest smile that reached his eyes. Then it settled. The next morning, the sun rose pink over the hills, lighting the Carter ranch in soft fire. Clara woke to the sound of roosters and the smell of brewing coffee. Elias was already outside, tending to the horses. She watched him through the window, his movements steady, unhurried. For the first time in years, she felt the strange ache of hope. Days turned into weeks. She helped mend fences, learned to cook over the old stove, and tended the small garden behind the house. The townsfolk whispered at first, surprised that the quiet girl from the shelter had ended up with one of the most respected ranchers around. But as the months passed, they saw something blooming between the two, something genuine. One evening, as thunder rolled over the far ridge, Elias found her standing by the corral, watching the storm roll in. The wind caught her hair, the sky alive with lightning. He came up beside her, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You ain't afraid of storms, are you?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "No, storms make the world clean again." He looked at her profile, the courage in her calmness, and realized some storms don't destroy. They rebuild. That night, as rain tapped softly against the roof, Elias sat by the fire while Clara mended one of his shirts. For a while, they said nothing. The silence wasn't empty, it was peaceful, shared. Finally, he spoke, voice low. "When I first saw you," he said, "I thought the agency had made a mistake. But now, I reckon I'd been the one who didn't know what I was looking for." Clara glanced up, warmth flickering behind her shy smile. "And now?" He leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Now I know." The fire crackled between them, and in its glow, two broken souls began to fit together, not by chance, but by grace. Outside, the storm passed, leaving the earth clean and the sky full of stars. And in that small, quiet house on the prairie, love, simple, strong, and unspoken, took its first breath. If you felt the heart in this story, don't forget to subscribe for more tales of love, faith, and second chances beneath the western sky.